In 2011, you could get a Roland Juno 60 for under $500. Today, you're lucky to find one in working condition for under $5,000. The hardest thing about being a certified synth addict is not finding the legends of the past, but rather it's predicting the legends of the future and discovering them before they get discontinued, they get hyped, and the prices inevitably rise. So it's 2026, and after playing hundreds of hours on so many great modern synths, these are the 3 underrated synthesizers that I think have the potential for that future cult classic status. To keep things interesting, I'm not going to be talking about the really obvious commercially successful synths that probably come to your mind, things like the Micro Freak, the Mini Log, the Grandmother, because we all know those are great, many people love them, but I'm going to focus instead on 3 synths that I think, while they might not have made as much of a splash commercially, they are really, really unique, underrated future cult classics for 3 very different reasons. If you love synths and want to see more videos like this, then please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what you think a modern synth is that's destined to become a future cult classic. With that out of the way, let's jump to my first pick, which is the GS Music E7. Now, the GS Music E7 to me has every ingredient needed to become a future legendary synth. It's a classic underdog story. GS Music are a tiny company founded by a husband and wife in Argentina, and the E7 virtually came out of nowhere during an era where a lot of the biggest synth builders were not able to or not willing to recreate a lot of the synths from their past legacies. And here comes this tiny builder from Argentina that is able to out-engineer the giants like Korg and Roland in terms of making an analog synth that sounds just phenomenal. It has a really, really distinct, rich, full-bodied, vintage character. And I think that the E7, it didn't initially make a big wave. Since then, while still underrated, the E7 has started to pick up a little bit of a cult status, being used by players such as Matt Johnson from Jamiroquai, who's gone on record saying it's one of the best sounding analog synths he's ever played. To me, the E7 feels like a future classic because it simultaneously is able to capture that 80s era, homage to synths like the Prophet 5, the Oberheim OB-X, etc. But it's an original design. It doesn't sound like anything else. It doesn't try to copy anything else, and I think that GS Music have been able to make a synth that will stand the test of time for that reason and will only get more popular as the years go by. The second synth that I think is destined to become a future classic is the Elta Music Solar 42. The Solar 42 is the ultimate ambient synthesizer, and it's so ambitious and weird that nothing can match or replicate its sound and workflow. I think this is going to be a future classic because it's the Buchla of our era. It's expensive, it's super niche, and if you're going to pick one of these up, you really have to be sure that this is what you want because it is not a flexible synthesizer. However, for drone music, ambient music, experimental music, it really is the apex predator and nothing else really can come close. But the reason why I think that it's destined to become a future classic is because of the layout, because there have been lots of great ambient synths before, and let's be honest, any synth can be ambient if you know what you're doing. But I think the Solar 42 just really perfectly balances between the noise and drone and weirdness that, is very, very niche and is not going to have a lot of practical melodic applications that some synths like the Soma synthesizers tend to fall into, and something more traditionally harmonic and melodic. The Solar 42, it just has its own path that it's taking. And I think that over time, because of just how distinctive it is, the homage to Eastern Bloc synthesis with the Polyvox filter, the fact that it really is a self-contained instrument. It really feels more like a different instrument entirely than something like here's another synthesizer. I think for that reason, the Solar 42 is destined to become a future classic years down the road within the ambient and scoring community. Before we go any further, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video. Just kidding, this video does not have a sponsor. Instead, if you want to hear my new song, Younger Years with Casey Cook, it's out tonight at midnight. And better yet, this song is all about nostalgia for the past, and if you could talk to your younger self. And we're doing a really fun fan music video. So if you want to submit a photo or a video from your past to be included in our music video, then click the link in the description. I really hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for listening and supporting my music.
You'll never regret the high times, running from all the red lights, sneaking out late at night. If I knew then what I know now, I'd go back to the younger years. Yeah, I go back to the younger years. Maybe in 20 years, I go back, yeah, I go back. We'll think back to the younger years.
Okay, before we get to my last pick for future classic synthesizers, I've got one honorable mention that just almost made the cut, and that is the Korg Prologue. Now, the Korg Prologue was actually my first ever hardware synthesizer. I did the completely irrational thing, and instead of buying a cheap synthesizer to test out, I just saved a bunch of money and went all in and bought a Prologue right when it came out, I think 2018 or 2019, and I still have it to this day. It's in my storage locker. I love it. It's a great synth. So why is it not my first choice? Well, the Korg Prologue, when it first came out, was just full of bugs and issues. I actually had mine completely fail on me, and it cost me several $100s to repair. And while they've ironed everything out, it's a little bit too late, I think, because the Korg Prologue never really made the splash that I think it deserved. It's a phenomenal synth, and if you do want a great sounding dystopian characterful synth, the filter I will always talk about, it's like an MS-20 style filter on a polysynth. The Prologue is a stark reminder that you can have the best synthesizer ever, and if you botch the release with bugs and firmware issues, that's all anybody's going to remember. My final pick for future classic synthesizers is the UDO Super 6. Now, if you know me, you might be very surprised by this because I don't even own a Super 6. So why is it on this list, and why is it above something like the Korg Prologue? Well, let me explain. I think for me, the reason why the Super 6 and UDO synths in general to me feel like future classics is I feel like they understand better than anyone the idea of taking from history and taking from the lineage and legacy of classics, but then iterating and making something entirely new. First up, the aesthetic of the Super 6, especially in blue, to me is the most distinctive and iconic modern synthesizer. Secondly, the choice to make the Super 6 have no screen, I think is so bold and will go down for a lot of reasons as a classic. I personally have the Super Gemini back there, which I think is even a better synthesizer, but I have to give this spot to the Super 6 because it was the first. And I think that UDO synths in general, they're never going to impress you on specs. They're really more like analog synthesizers that have weird digital quirks. And I think that, if you're not interested in that, fair play, I get it. But to me, they're the only company right now that is really trying to push forward like modern synthesizers in this way while still taking from the past, where they're going no screens, really purposeful and distinctive controls, but then not being bound by tradition of saying, oh, we have to have everything be analog. Of my 3 picks, I know this is probably the most controversial because the Super 6 doesn't really do anything new sound-wise, but I think let the results speak for themselves. It's already being used by artists like James Blake, Tom York, and my personal hero, Porter Robinson. And I think the Super 6 and the following even better Super Gemini and Super 8, they really exhibit a philosophy that pairs perfectly with what I think many of us love about synthesizers, which is that feeling of getting lost in an instrument. And I believe for that reason, the Super 6, especially with the fact that they're not as expensive as they used to be on the used market, is going to go down in history as a future classic synthesizer. That's all for me today. Thank you for watching, and remember to let me know in the comments below what you think is going to be the future classic synthesizer of our time. I'll see you in the next video.